Well, I have my winter jacket on today, which is probably a good indication that it's time to harvest sunchokes. These plants are really easy to grow. They propagate on their own, right? They multiply, and they're fairly easy and straightforward to harvest, aside from the cold weather that comes along with it. So there are a couple of really cool things about sunchokes, right? They're a perennial plant, so you don't have to plant them every year. They just come back. They kind of spread on their own too, so which can be a good thing, but you also want to be mindful of where you plant them, because wherever they grow is, they're gonna grow and they're gonna multiply. And also the plants can get really tall too. They can get easily 8 to 9 feet tall. Sometimes they can get taller than that too. So unless if you prune them, that's also an option. You can prune them throughout the season as well. Also, sunchokes are a C3 photosynthetic plant, which really basically that just means that they photosynthesize like most other plants, other than certain types of warm season grasses or certain plants like amaranth and lamb's quarters, which are C4 photosynthetic. So the C3 photosynthetic pathway, which is the pathway of sunchokes and most plants out there, is not necessarily the most efficient. Even though C3 photosynthetic isn't the most efficient, there might seem to be like a spectrum on some plants are more efficient on carrying out the C3 photosynthetic pathway than other plants, and sunchokes are pretty efficient at that. So in short, sunchokes are a very effective C3 photosynthetic plant, and they need to be, since they have to store a lot of energy in their tubers for over the winter. Alright, so putting the science aside, what I'm doing here is I am carefully digging out sunchoke tubers. I'm just pulling up the stalks, and then I'm picking off the tubers that I can find, and then I put those bases of the stalks back in the soil when I'm done, because there are usually little like rootlets or sunchoke tubers or small ones that will go back into the soil then along with that, and then they will sprout and grow next year into new sunchoke plants. So I generally don't worry too much about keeping specific tubers for replanting. I just kind of figure that the sunchoke kind of takes care of that on its own when I just put the material that I'm not going to use back in the row. And for the last few years, that's worked pretty well. Now I also feel around in the soil where I've pulled up the sunchoke stalks, because usually there are some tubers, and some of them can go kind of deep too into the ground. So I just kind of feel around with my hands carefully, and then I pull out those tubers, maybe move some dirt aside, because they can kind of hide, because sometimes those tubers can be positioned a little ways out from the base of the plant. So you also have to look for them a little bit too. Sometimes I may use a pitchfork, but I do so carefully, and I use it at a distance from the base of the plant, because I don't want to impale or damage the tubers. But if I go out maybe about a foot or so out from the base of the plant, and then I use the pitchfork to uproot that can be helpful in finding the tubers and not having to scrounge around in the soil for blindly for these tubers. But whatever method works best. Usually I just use my hands, but sometimes I'll use the pitchfork as well in certain situations. So I hope you enjoyed this video on harvesting sunchokes. They can store maybe about a week in the fridge, but they're best used like immediately or fresh. Now I also freeze sunchokes, right? So I'll just like cut them up, put them in jars and freeze them. So thank you so much for checking out this video. I appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Take care.